Namaste. Welcome to Satsang. So I wanted to discuss perhaps a direct method for waking up and living as the truth of who we are, what we are. And it's the same thing I'm always talking about, but my kind of role is to try to package it differently so that each different way we hear it, it's going in. And after a certain amount of repetitions, the consciousness, the self that you really are, the infinite self, begins to act upon that. So it never hurts to hear the truth again, over and over. In fact, it helps. We don't learn as the self in the same way that we would learn and study a degree in something. It's not about how much can I remember and cram into my memory. It's more about hearing the truth over and over and doing our best to apply it from wherever we are in our journey. And then that hearing of the truth becomes clearer and easier, and the application becomes more and more effortless and automatic. So I want to talk about the self today and do some direct seeing, some meditation. There's a very fine line between those two in the end. And just to perhaps look at it in an easier way than we might have considered possible for us. So there is, the self has often been called the attentionless place, where we're not paying attention to anything in particular. And this is really the kind of doorway into recognizing and being that I want to really look at today. All of us are interested in finding out what we are and living as that, because it brings peace. It brings an absence of suffering. It brings an inability to contract into a negative state anymore, or to contract around a negative state, first and foremost. And what does that mean in reality? Does it mean an empty mind, a quiet mind, absence of thoughts? Pretty much eventually, but before that, there is a much easier stage which will lead to the end of suffering, which is the absence of any ability to believe any thoughts. So thoughts can be coming and going just as quickly as they are now for us, just as plentiful. But can you imagine for a moment if you couldn't pay attention to any particular thought or object at all? So paying attention to something is the cause of suffering. Paying attention to something, to some object. And the objects that bother us most when we pay attention to them are our own thoughts. So it's possible to move through any experience in life and to not suffer, whether that experience is what people will call good or bad or awful or heavenly, hellish. It's really our own thoughts about what's going on that we keep experiencing. Whatever thoughts we're paying attention to, we're going to experience the corresponding emotion that goes along with that thought, and the reflecting experience in and as our life, in and as our relationships, our journey to awakening, our finances, our career, everything will reflect the predominant ideas that we're holding on to. And how do we hold on to thoughts then? What is it when we believe a thought? And how do we undo our ability to believe a thought? What is that crux of the matter that when we achieve it, we find that any thought can arise in mind and it has no effect upon us at all. We can listen to it if we want to, Some thoughts are, of course, useful, but the vast majority of our thought process is repetitive, and it is usually some negative version of reality. And it's a commentary that when we pay attention to it, we're going to experience. Whether we're paying attention to thoughts because we're believing them or because we've seen they're not real and we wish they would go away, we're still paying attention. And that's not going to lead to peace. So how do we turn that around in a very simple and practical way? We're just going to do a little experiment here, which you can all follow along with, just to illustrate a point that we don't necessarily have to have our attention going where our senses are going, where our mind is going. So just as an example, if you pick any object in the room that you're sitting in, it can be any object at all. It can be some completely insentient thing, and let your eyes rest upon it. It doesn't matter what it is, but as your eyes rest upon that object, you can at the same time, without moving your eyes away from the object. So I'm looking at a cushion now on my sofa, and as I look at my cushion, I can become aware of the space around the cushion, around the sofa. I can become aware of the space that the sofa and the cushion are appearing in. So let's just practice this now without taking your eyes off of something, not trying hard, just let your gaze rest on an object. You can, at the same time, notice that your attention can notice. You could be looking at the cushion or whatever it is and be aware of the space around it. And this is something that most of us haven't really learned that it's even possible to do, that I can let my senses focus upon an object, and at the same time, my attention can be aware of the formlessness, the spaciousness around and inside that object, that I can kind of allow my attention to relax and not pay attention to any particular thing. That these two things are actually different, that what my eyes are looking at and what I am focused upon can be very, very different. So let's just prove that to ourselves one more time. Pick a different object. You can even use your own body, just becoming aware of your own body, noticing your body and noticing the space around it in which it is appearing. And as you practice this, it gets easier and easier and more obvious that this is some faculty that we've always had. We just haven't really perhaps known it was there. We haven't really noticed. So no matter what our senses are focused upon, we can still experience the peace of having our attention in a very open and relaxed way. Attention can actually look at one particular thing. So it can really zoom into that object and pay attention to it. Or attention can open up and be aware, not paying attention to anything. Or if you prefer, paying attention to the formlessness, the emptiness that is around any particular object. And as we begin to do this, it will become clearer that we can spend our whole life like this. We can actually have our attention resting in the attentionless way, where we're not paying attention to anything, even when our eyes are looking at something. We can do it right now with our sense of hearing as well, if we want to join along. So as I'm speaking, you can just be listening. You don't necessarily have to listen to these words. You're just listening in an open way. And there's an openness about your listening, so you can hear every sound in your environment. You can hear a kind of silence in the background as well. And you can also hear the words. You're not having to fixate upon any particular sound. Again, attention is open. The listening is open. So attention has these two modes of being. So we can zoom it in and contract around an object, or we can practice, which is really what meditation is, a direct meditation, to just notice the spaciousness, the formlessness, the beingness, the consciousness, the self, whatever we want to call it, in which any particular object is arising. It's good to practice like this on objects, on sounds. If you hear a car passing outside, does it stop you hearing the words I'm speaking at the same time? Does it have to be that you only listen to one sound at once? Or is there a much more open way, an attentionless way where you're not zoning in on one thing? Because that is really what causes suffering. When we only remember how to zoom in like this. And of course, the most beneficial way we can use this practice is really when it comes to paying attention to thoughts. Most of us, very similar to looking at the cushion on the sofa, when a thought arises in our mind, there is no option at all for most of us except to pay attention to that thought. And some thoughts, there is a lot of attention goes to that thought for a very long time, so much so that we don't even recognize that thought consciously going through our mind. We just experience the emotion and then the reflecting experience of that. So what would it be like then if the thought popped up in our mind and we still practice this attentionless way, paying attention to the no-thingness rather than the thingness of the thought? The thought can be there, and we're noticing the empty space in which it's arising. So we're not fighting with any thought. We're not making it go away. We're not really trying to do anything with it at all. We're just recognizing that we have a choice in that moment, whether to really look at that thought, and then we'll experience that thought, or whether to let the thought be there and practice opening our attention outwards or into this very open way. And this is switching from this one method of attention, paying attention to something, to allowing attention to rest openly in the no-thingness, the emptiness, which is really accessible just by starting with the empty space around any object. And allowing that to become a habit, allowing the body-mind to begin to slow down. And we pay attention to the formlessness, the no-thingness, the emptiness. We begin to relax, we begin to feel calmer, we begin to feel quieter. And perhaps most importantly, when we're paying attention to no-thingness, to awareness, whatever we're calling it, the self, we cannot be paying attention to that thought at the same time. Attention has two modes, either contracts around something or it opens up. And it cannot do both at the same time. And even better news is that once we've practiced opening attention up, and we keep doing that, and we keep doing that, it becomes a habit. At some point, it becomes a habit. And just by doing this simple thing over and over again, there comes a point where, probably without even noticing it's happened, you find that you cannot contract around an object. What does that mean? You cannot believe any thought at all. Thoughts may be there, and then it's your choice then whether to pay attention to them or not. But even if you do listen to that thought, immediately after you've finished with that thought and it's disappeared again, as thoughts come and go, attention automatically and effortlessly reverts back to this openness. By default, your default setting has changed. Most people's default setting is to As soon as a thought pops up, to close around it. And that makes us feel small. And it makes us experience that thought as if it's very, very real. So could awakening then, could self-realization, could effortless awareness of awareness constantly be simply this? Could it simply be that we have practiced and trained ourselves to separate attention from what our senses are perceiving, and separating attention from what our mind is thinking and what our body is feeling, and that has just become a habit. And like with any habit, it takes a little reminding and remembering at first, but like any habit, it becomes habitual, automatic, and effortless eventually, after a much shorter time than you would imagine. Because really the only objects that really give us trouble is our thoughts, when we believe our thoughts, not even our thoughts, but believing those thoughts. The simple habit of attention automatically going to and contracting around this thought. That really is belief. That's the believing process right there. And if you've trained your attention to stay open, no matter what thought arises, there's no capacity for you to automatically believe a thought. And as that settles in, you're in effortless, constant peace, which deepens into love, and that deepens into joy. And then clarity and compassion and all the usual things that we would associate with awakening. And as that deepens, as that settles, the thoughts are just coming and going, and you can't even actually pay attention to them if you wanted to, really. At least not only to them. After a while, you begin to notice that mind is going quiet by itself. There isn't any paying attention to thoughts, and thoughts are just happening, and some are useful. Then all of the useless thoughts are going to fade away. What we tend to do is to try to push away those thoughts first. When they go away, says our egoic sense of self, when mind goes quiet, then I'll stop believing thoughts. But it has to be the other way around. I have to stop believing those thoughts first. And then I can come to some sense that mind begins to fall into silence on its own. It is our interest in the mind that is proliferating and propagating the thought stream, endless thoughts. And either that attention, that interest is because we're believing those thoughts at first, but most importantly, perhaps when we've seen that they're not true, but we still don't know how to stop paying attention to them. So when I really got this, it became really clear that awakening for me was really doable. It really was a habit to cultivate, and it began to change my entire life. As I stopped believing these thoughts, I stopped feeling the resulting negative emotions. Naturally, when we're not investing energy in these thoughts, our emotional state is better, and our experience begins to reflect back to us. Our relationships, our family, our career, everything begins to reflect back to us that peace that comes from. Peace is simply not being able to believe any thought. And do you have to sort through and unbelieve or disbelieve or unsubscribe every single thought? No, that would take forever. You'd never get to the end. Instead, here's a simpler way of learning to open attention up while mind is still actively in the thought process. It doesn't need to take that long. And if you would just devote yourself to this for 30 days, you would see probably 80% of your thought process you cannot believe anymore. And it would continue past that, getting easier and easier. So we can practice right now. If we just watch for the next thought that arises, whatever that thought is, and then as it arises, we can just shift our attention to the space in which it's appearing. We can do it with any emotion too that arises. We can notice the emotion and notice the stillness in which that emotion is moving by contrast. Any experience that comes and goes, good or bad, we can contrast that, open our attention up to the formless space in which it's occurring. If there's an argument with another being and you and another being, you can shift attention to the spaciousness in which your body and the other body is appearing. And what I really want to get across is the fact that this is just a habit, just because we've done this our entire life. And just because we haven't known there's a different way for attention to be, a much more effortless way, doesn't mean that it's any harder to begin to change that right now. So when we're paying attention to awareness, when we're paying attention to silence, stillness, consciousness, the self, by whatever name we're calling it, it's really the attentionless state where we're not paying attention to anything, any object, any thought, any movement. And it's effortless because we're not having to get rid of the movement, the change, the becomingness. We're just noticing that our attention can be separate to it. We don't have to contract automatically and immediately around it. And as I began to really take this on board, I began to really realize what the formlessness is, that it's not a thing, and that we can pay attention to nothingness just as easily. We can do it right now. You can notice the empty space in the room that you're sitting in, paying attention to the nothingness, just like that. We didn't have to do 25 years of yoga to get there. We just shifted our way, our mode of paying attention. I can focus on an object in the room, or I can pay attention to the nothingness in the room. One of those costs us a lot of energy. The other one is effortless, easy, and becomes a habit. So we're just replacing the habit of using only this first mode of attention with the second one. You cannot do both at the same time. And as you start to practice opening up attention, you begin to feel the benefits of it immediately. And after 30 days, it becomes a habit to do that. It becomes a sense that anything I'm paying attention to with my senses, my attention doesn't have to contract around that. So let's just take a few moments now before I open it up for questions, just to watch for a thought arising. And then you can just practice shifting attention to the nothingness that it's appearing in. Empty space. If it's more accessible to just call it empty space at first, that's totally okay. It's really the same. Can we pay attention in this open way? As we begin to do this, it's actually the most relaxing and fun and simple form of meditation or self-inquiry, whatever we want to call it, really. And it'll relax the body too, it'll relax the mind. Even while everything in your mind, everything in your body, everything in your world hasn't changed at all, peace is available right now from this very simple shift of how we're paying attention. It's open, it's free. There is never a time when we have to pay attention to the thought, to the object. That is only a habit that we've cultivated. And it can be undone by cultivating this new habit. Here is the unsubscribe button to the entire mind and its contents. Here is the way to step out of believing a thought and allowing awareness, attention, awareness, same thing here, to come back into its effortless resting place where it's not paying attention to anything at all. It's aware of everything, but it's not paying attention to anything in particular. All that's coming and going is just arising inside awareness, inside attention. And you're not zooming in to any particular thing. It's possible when this becomes a habit to move through your entire day this way. And this is how we are in deep sleep. In deep sleep, there's nothing to pay attention to. There's no thing to pay attention to. And we're paying attention to nothingness in deep sleep. That's why it's so relaxing, so enjoyable. And we can learn to do this in the waking state right now, in its utter simplicity. It's different to how we're taught to focus, to function as human beings. But when I really began to understand this, I began to realize just how available awakening is. Awakening is only when this has become a habit, when this has become effortless, continuous. So our ears can hear a sound like these words and be aware of the silence in the background. Also, we're aware of the silence. We can watch a thought arise, notice the space it's occurring in. Just practicing like this is going to bring a lot of results. Just watching as a thought forms in your mind, seeing if there are any thoughts, and just gently shifting attention to the space the thought is appearing in. A very, very simple thing to do. As we begin to pay attention to the emptiness, the formlessness, the space, naturally the coming and goingness of all things becomes a little less in the forefront. It begins to move to the background. And the spaciousness, the formlessness becomes more and more clear and obvious. And everything that's happening and moving and changing and coming and going is just happening and moving and changing and coming and going. And less we have this sense that we have to manage it. We're just watching it unfold. So I hope you have had a taste of the simplicity of this way, which all direct meditation is pointing towards, that there isn't any greater or more difficult skill than this, that when this has become habitual, it also becomes effortless. It also becomes continuous. That from that point forward, anything can arise in your mind, anything at all, any thought, good, bad, or ugly, and it will begin to become clear that it cannot touch you, that thoughts are happening inside you rather than to you. The sense that my mind is attacking me is really because we're contracting around the thoughts. It feels like it's happening to us. But there is a whole universe of difference in how we feel, how our life is, when we know that thoughts are happening inside the spaciousness that we are. And we've forgotten how to pay attention to them only. We are absolutely free in that moment, even before the habit is formed. From the very first moment we open our attention up in this way, we'll experience freedom. And it may come and go at first as we contract around thoughts. But it's just the habit to form there. Okay, so I will open it up for questions, or if anyone wants to ask anything, we'll see how many hands go up. Sergio, first, whenever you're ready.
First of all, I want to deeply thank you again and again, endlessly, for the simplicity and reminding us how easy it is to be the self, to abide in the self. I've been looking, and since May of last year, I came to know you, and it was just finally to understand that awakening was here, available for me, and now I wanted to express this gratitude.
Thank you. Lovely. Thank you very much for that. Okay. We'll go to Tai when you're ready.
Hi, Helen.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I haven't plucked up the courage to speak to you yet.
Well, I'm glad you are. It's good to, not always the easiest thing to do, you know.
I know, but it's very similar to Sergio. I found you in the past year during lockdown, and I've just been so touched by the way you express and share these lovely teachings. I don't really have a question either, just sort of gratitude, and it's been so lovely to connect with you, and I really love your way of expressing, and I don't know how to describe what's happening in me, but there is like a whirlpool of peace and stillness that is always here, you know, and whatever is going on with my family and children and life and my politics, you know, I get crazy about what's going on, and yet it's always here to come back to. So, and it feels like that's sort of what you're sharing.
It begins to cushion everything that you're going through, doesn't it? It kind of wraps you in a bubble of, you're going through the same experiences, but they're not quite impacting you like they used to, and then eventually they're not impacting you at all in a negative way, as it just gets more and more, hopefully it's becoming more prominent, that peace and stillness, day by day, as you're kind of sinking into it deeper.
That it's with everything that maybe is happening around, it is there as well, you know, as a sort of like a soothing balm, or you know, a bliss, or
and eventually it just flips on its head, that peace and that stillness is so in the foreground and the noise of the mind and everything and the emotions are in the background. It's kind of, at first it's the other way around, isn't it? We have to really kind of pay attention to that stillness, but then after a while it flips on its head, and you have to really pay attention to, like, what did mind say? I can't really hear it, you know. Obviously you might not be there yet, but you maybe can see that that's coming, you know, and it gets faster and faster as we begin to recognize that is there all the time, that is accessible for us.
How can it not be here all the time? And where can it go?
Yeah. It gets a lot easier then, doesn't it? You realize I can't be cut off from it. That's just a thought that I have believed a lot in the past, but I can't believe it anymore. And then it just becomes clear that it's right here all the time. Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm so glad it's having a positive effect, and good to meet you and talk to you.
Yeah, lovely. Maybe I can come one day in person.
Yeah, hopefully not too long. We'll be able to all be in a room together, you know. Restrictions lift, if they lift, okay, you know, so as is the plan. So
yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks, Helen.
Lovely. Good to talk to you. Thank you. Okay. Ron, when you're ready. Excuse me.
Hey, Helen.
Hi, how you doing?
Great, thanks. Can you speak a little bit more to hearing without listening, seeing without looking, or are you really zooming in a little bit more when, again, you have a conversation like this with somebody, or is it still more of a different, expanded kind of experience? Just curious. I'm sensing that the sages actually probably heard more than most people here, and probably saw more than most people here, but yet they may not have been particularly zoomed in. So I'm just kind of curious for your thoughts around it.
Yeah, it's like if we have the sense that we're a separate being, like now if we're talking like this, the two of us, I can hear these words are coming out of my mouth. I can hear when you speak. There's several faint sounds in the background. There's birds singing in the background where you are. All of that's just being taken in by the senses, and my attention is just resting on the space, the spaciousness in which all of this is appearing habitually now. And it has the effect of you hear a lot more than you used to, and you can take in a lot more than you used to. A lot of what we experience is filtered out by the brain anyway, because it would be overwhelming. But without that sense that I'm here only listening to you over there, which means I'm only hearing your words and I'm kind of ignoring everything else by default, there's an openness about that really is a much richer, deeper experience available in every moment. Like my eyes can be looking at your image now, and I could effortlessly hear whatever words come out of your mouth next, but there isn't a contraction around that, sort of a different way of paying attention.
Is there still just a little bit more of a zooming in on, you know, again, I guess I'm the object at this point in time in our discussion, or not really?
I can do that. I could really zoom in on you if I wanted to, but it's not a habit by default now. And I find it costs a lot of energy now for me to do that. So I only do it if I really have to. Like if I'm filling out some paperwork or something where I, need to. The downside, I guess, is that you can miss some things, little details but you're taking in so much more. So you do have that capacity to kind of zoom in. It's like just being aware of a whole stadium rather than just always focused on one seat in the middle of this stadium. You're taking in a much bigger picture constantly. Doesn't mean you can really look at that one seat if you want to and who's sitting in it and all that stuff. but it's not the default setting then.
Thank you.
Does that help you?
Yes.
Good. Lovely. Good to talk to you. Okay, Natasha, when you're ready.
Hi, Helen.
Hi, how you doing?
That was lovely. It was just lovely. I came to it with kind of anxiety in the stomach. It's my nephew's mother's funeral today, and I was doing some meditation just before, and actually a response that you gave to a mail, because I'm on the Dissolving the Ego course, about trying to transmit kind of peace just through being at peace myself. And I realized that a lot of this stomach upset that I felt this morning, which I don't usually have, is probably due to the fact that my brother and my nephew are going through this difficult time. That's kind of part of the question. You know, can you kind of pick up these tensions maybe that other very close family members are feeling? And another part of the question was that when I'm like just now was really, really enjoying being in this space and connecting to the space around the thoughts and around the images. And when I step out of it, and this does happen to me sometimes over the past weeks when I've been doing this meditation, I feel in a really peaceful, open, grounded state. And then I have a difficulty reconnecting with the kind of pace of my work or the energy around me, other people. I feel like I'm slightly being pushed to speed up tempo. And it's like the words want to come so much more slowly, and the movement wants to come so much more slowly.
Like life just wants to slow down a little bit. How you
really
are with life slows down, doesn't it, in a way?
Yeah. And I and how do I do that?
If you can see, if you are someone accessing the formless space, then you might feel this push-pull between I'm focusing on this and then I'm going back to normal life and work and that normal way. But if you can confirm that you are that formless space in which the sense of someone is getting busy doing whatever you need to do, then it's a whole different thing. You won't feel this tug of war going on, because naturally the sense of someone is like the software program for the body, and it can quite effortlessly function if you're just resting as that, if identity is shifted to knowing that you are that formlessness, that spaciousness, awareness, whatever we're calling it, that quietness. That there can be days where your body and your mind are very busy, very focused, and it's not going to be giving you the same trouble as if you feel you are someone that is paying attention to formlessness. Can you see the difference there in that? Do you want me to say a little bit more about that?
Please.
So if I am the entire stadium, the football stadium, how bothered am I going to be if one guy in one seat is jumping up and down saying, I've got too much to do, or something like that. I've got too many things on my to-do list. But if I am the person jumping up and down, sorry, there's some noise in the background here. If I am the person jumping up and down on that seat, then I'm going to be noticing the formlessness is just going to be one more thing on my to-do list. I'm going to feel very overwhelmed, and I'll want to stay there noticing the formlessness. I won't want to go back to the usual way. So it's a long way around of saying this isn't your issue as the self. If you are the silence, is this even your issue? Are you the one that's got to adjust back to the normal way of functioning when you're going to work? What is it that's going to work? It's your body, it's your mind. Yeah. Does that help? Or?
Yeah.
It's a very common obstruction that comes up for a lot of beings. So I'm glad you brought it up. But it is, there is a sense that deepens that I'm just watching. I'm paying attention to myself when I'm paying attention to the openness. And the phenomena that go on, whether they're fast or slow, whether it's a hectic day or whether it's a quiet day, it's just going on inside you. It's not happening to you. There's a real big difference in the way we experience that. Was there a, sorry, if there was a first part to your question?
Well, the first part was this sense of feeling a discomfort, a physical discomfort related to possibly other family members.
Yeah.
Feeling, unhappy or unwell or anxious. And that to what extent, I mean, I felt much better when I did some meditation previous to this encounter on that, and trying to really relax my solar plexus, because I suddenly figured, okay, they're going to be really he's going to be feeling really nervous. And rather than phone him, I just meditated on that. But it was a question about that. To what extent can we pick up on others' energies? If
Yeah,
we're all one.
You'll find that happens more often, but not, if I'm aware of the spaciousness, I'm kind of aware. It's not me here being aware of it. It's the spaciousness recognizing itself. So that's going to naturally include everything that's arising in it. And that ultimately is infinite, is everything. But in terms of practical daily living, you may become aware of what people are not thinking in terms of their actual thoughts, but the energy field that's around them, much more noticeable, what type of frequency they're holding on to. But again, that will be not like it is as a separate being. As a separate being, if I'm picking up energies of all these other beings, it can become extraordinarily overwhelming and draining and have an effect upon our own system, our own body. But that is from the belief that they're outside of me, they're separate to me. If I am the field, if I am the spaciousness, I'm all these beings arising in it, and none of them are affecting me here. They're just all arising in it. It's like a much more general, open way without the separation, the idea of separation there. You can be in a very crowded room with loads of beings that are very happy, and you'll be uplifted a little bit, but you're not going to be, this peak high and then you've got to crash down again. And also the reverse won't happen either. This sense that there's going to be somebody's sapping your energy or your strength or something like that, and then it affects you in a negative way. Yeah. It's a difference, isn't it, between experiencing it as a someone or experiencing it as the open field of awareness. It's completely different in the way, which is why sometimes in satsang somebody else will ask you a question, or I'll say something that addresses a question that you didn't know you had, because there is a oneness like that, but it's not as a separate being would experience it. So I might not consciously recognize what answer someone needs to a question that they haven't even verbalized, but it will come out anyway in that connected nature, just as you'll experience probably at the funeral. You'll say something that perhaps somebody needed to hear, but you weren't aware of who it was that needed it. It's just your energy will be different as well. So it's you can't help but be helpful from that place.
And I suppose if I'm picking up on stuff, and it's not that I do it a lot, but physically, then by looking after this sort of physical body that's holding the noumenon or the self, it's a good idea then maybe to remove myself, or to be looking after myself physically in order to feel more centered and to feel.
It is. But the only thing that we've ever suffered from is this idea that there's other beings that can affect us. That's what causes the distress in the body. Naturally, our body can deal with the energies of others just like it can deal with our own energies. and it can process those very, very quickly from that openness. So yes, but also the root cause of that is the separation thinking.
Yeah.
Because you could be in a room with just one being and feel completely drained and an urge to run away, or you could be in a room with 100 beings and feel so peaceful and undisturbed. And what's the difference between those? It's the thought process, isn't it?
Right.
We're only ever experiencing our thoughts about those beings. And if one of our thoughts about these other beings is that, oh gosh, they're always quite down, and it takes me an hour afterwards to pick myself back up again, and I have to go walk in the woods to do it, that may seem really valid to hold on to that belief, that feeling. But we are literally experiencing that thought, and we cannot have a different experience until we would, sort of realize that. You can be around any being as the self and not be pulled down. In fact, you'll lift them up the other way.
Thank you.
Good questions. Good to talk to you. Okay, so Sophie, I think, is next. So we'll take Sophie and Beth's questions, and then we'll call it a halt for today. So,
hi, Helen.
Sophie.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good. Yeah. It's kind of coming more into true alignment, or the last question was really helpful, because that was, again, just like you said, it was addressing something I was also needing to hear.
Tends to work like that, doesn't it? Tends to work out that way.
Yeah, well, yes, picking up on others, because if you realize there aren't any others, and then and also not needing to change that difficult feeling in yourself, brings that openness again. It's when you think, oh, I don't want to feel like this, whether it's because of them or not. But what I'd like to just get some clarity on is this sense of awareness passing through objects. It's like how I'm experiencing at the moment is like there's this dense levels of density, and the awareness has no density, but the sensations in the body feels like they have a density, or not so much objects, although, because I don't feel them, but I'm sure they do as well. And how that then there's a sense of it, there's no boundary, so it's not stopping at the object, it's passing through. So it's a bit like Swiss cheese. There's a sense that there's these holes within the experience of an object of the body mind, and awareness is just passing through that. Mm-hmm. I know that's a bit of an image and a thought, but yeah, and I just maybe I don't really need to even try and understand this, but there's that sense of that's how I'm experiencing it, and there is more relaxation around that, because it's not that focus in that intensity like you were just saying.
Yeah.
So that's, and also just now you were talking about you can't do both. You can be open relaxation, open awareness, and not also concentrated. But your exercise was showing that you can do both. You can be looking at an object, aware of the object.
Your eyes looking at an object, but your awareness can be looking at itself. You see?
Yeah.
So you can either be aware of a thought, or you can be aware of awareness. You can't be aware of both at the same time. Where your main focus is will be one or the other. So your
Maybe
eyes can look at an object, but your awareness, your attention can be in this open state, this attentionless way at the same time. Does that make it clearer? Oh.
Yeah, but in the same way you can be aware of a thought, but also aware, but primarily more aware from you're aware of a thought as awareness, not as the thought, not focused on the thought. Yeah. So there is a sense that it's happening. You're aware that it's happening within yourself, within the self.
Yeah, thoughts can just be coming and going inside you. The awareness, the self. That's a very different experience, isn't it? And all this gets much simpler when you realize that thoughts are awareness too. Right? That's the final stage of realization, is where I see that everything that seems to be, even the subtle things like thoughts, are actually the self appearing to be something. So is the space in this room going through the wall behind me, the emptiness? Is the wall inside the emptiness, or is the emptiness inside the wall? Or are neither of those ultimately true? What if they're both the same? Emptiness appearing as emptiness and appearing as a wall. Then is there any inside or outside? Is there any two-ness left? That's where ultimately I had this wrestle with inside my own self as well. Eventually we'll come to realize that this world of form is really formlessness appearing like, looking like something, but not actually something. And then you're left with, there is only awareness, there is only the self. There's nothing arising out of it or merging back into it even. But if that's not totally clear yet, that's okay. Even this that is going to bring more peace, isn't it? That I can notice the awareness as the awareness, no matter what my senses are focused upon. I can stay in that open place, which is just something to cultivate, a practice to cultivate, a habit.
Yeah, okay. Yes, thank you. Yes, I am getting glimpses of that, knowing that it's all that, it's all the one, whatever's appearing in it. And there's no inherent reference within each object. There's no separate or myself. There's no inherent.
And when I contract around a thought and I think about something, it really seems to be separate and real and outside of me, and having emerged out of the self as a physical, actual thing. When my attention rests on the openness of awareness as awareness, then the things themselves become more dreamlike and ephemeral, and it becomes much clearer that they aren't really different to the emptiness that I'm perceiving. They seem to be. They feel like they are when you try to pick them up, and I still can't walk through a wall just because I've realized it's made of emptiness. But that's because it's a physical body resonating at the same vibration, very similar vibration. So emptiness is emptiness, and then at a certain point it vibrates and appears as all of this. But it's not an actual arising out of, it's just an appearance, like a mirage in the road on a hot day, or ripples on a still pond.
Like
it
a
looks like
hologram,
something, doesn't it?
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much.
Good. Lovely. Good to talk to you. Okay, but last but not least is Beth.
Hi, Helen.
Hi, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for the sign. Just a question about the following on from the exercise at the beginning. I just wanted to know if you could give me any. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I've noticed that, as well as thoughts coming and me noticing them, and there's plenty of them all the time.
Plenty to practice with, right?
I like to complicate things, so I've got something else to worry about.
Don't we all? Hey, don't we all?
So there's a great deal of movement. There's a lot of distraction. There's a lot of attention going from here to there, sort of restlessness of attention. And I'm just wanting to ask you whether I can apply the same. How can I apply the same sort of approach to that? Because they seem to be a bit different thoughts, even though it can include thoughts. Yeah. So
it was like that for me at first when I started to do this. I'd be noticing a thought, and then I'd try to practice opening up, and then, oh, I forgot to put my laundry on, or car drives past outside, and my stomach would rumble, and attention is just jumping around all over the place to something inside, something outside, backwards and forwards, and you get tired just watching it move, But still, there's two ways to deal with that. The first is to just let it move, let it do its thing. Just sit there and watch the crazy happen for 5 minutes or so. As you do that, it's going to begin to slow down and begin to relax. Attention's going to fixate on one thing or another more. It's not going to wander around. Or when you notice that it's jumped to something else, open up to the spaciousness around that object, whether it's an external object or an internal object, best you can. And then when it shifts again, attention, don't worry about it. Just do the same thing again. Just follow it around, so to speak.
Yeah, so treat it kindly and just the observing of it. I have a big belief, because I have had a diagnosis of ADD. So I've got a physical reason why I'm like this. And so
it's actually sometimes even more helpful if it's jumping around, because we can use that practice more. There's more, it's what's happening for everyone else, attention jumping, but probably faster. So you can speed your practice up, so to speak. You'll get more practice in the same meditation time than perhaps anyone else in that way. It's not necessarily something negative that's going to impact the seeing. In fact, it could be a positive thing in that way.
More to practice. I've never felt like it about that. Thank you.
There were days when I'd sit down to meditate, and it would, my mind would be fairly quiet. Oh, wow, this is great. And then days where it was just not like that at all. And my body was restless, and I was irritable, and there was so many thoughts. Those were the days I really made a breakthrough in this.
Yeah. I'm finding that I can let that be happening and bring back my awareness. And I've meditated every single day because I'm on the DDE course, and that's for me to maintain a sort of behavior is very challenging. But I have been able to notice and come back and sort of let it be okay.
Absolutely.
I've just come up that, well, maybe I can be doing that with the attention changing, like doing one thing 1 minute, the other thing the next.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
It is the same anyway. And, we all start off with, okay, I'm going to do this practice for 30 days straight, and nothing's going to get in my way. And then we end up getting distracted as life happens. And if we don't blame ourselves for that, gradually, day by day, week by week, in our pathway, we're becoming more consistent with something. And there's no finish line to that. There's no end point.
No. I am feeling I want to do it, which is great.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
That is good. Yeah, lovely. Okay, thanks. Great to talk to everyone. Okay, we'll leave it there for today. And I will see you all a week on Thursday for the next satsang. Thank you very much. Namaste.